And thanks for joining us on Simply Jewel Atypical Podcast, where we talk about life struggles, encompassing health, wellness, and alternative approaches to medicine naturally. Your host is Simply Jewel. So let's get ready to heal the mind, body, and soul. She's atypical of the average. SimplyJewel.com.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. You are listening to Simply Jewel Atypical Podcast. We have our guest tonight, James Green. So this is a treat for me because James and I go way back since childhood. So welcome, James, to the podcast. It's a privilege and an honor to be sitting with you tonight. For those that don't know, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, it's certainly my honor and privilege to be here with my longtime friend from back in the day, back in the neighborhood, Jewel, and watching her do what she's doing now on multiple platforms as I became more aware of the extent of what she was doing and celebrating that, getting good information out about health and well-being. Uh, my name in simple and short form, James Green. Whatever titles I have I deem irrelevant to this present moment. They are part of who I am. None of those are on my birth certificate. So whenever I introduce myself, I always introduce myself as James Green. That is what's on my birth certificate. Albert is my middle name, my father's name. Originally from Evanston, Illinois. Where we were born, myself and my sisters. Mother was a native of Chicago, father native of Virginia. After completing college, made his way up toward Evanston, doing work in ministry, social work, and so on. Encountered my mother along the way and birthed the three children, and that's how that origin began. And when I was about 3 years old is when we moved to Danville, Illinois, where my father became pastor, Second Baptist Church there in that city. And like I said, I was only 3 years old, so I had no idea the family that would be developed as a result of our geographical relocation to that city, and celebrate the neighborhood and the family that we were, the family that we were as a neighborhood, what we call the North End of our town, because at some point before it grew further north, the location that Jewel and I lived in was actually the North End. So over time, our neighborhood radius spanned about 2 blocks north and south, and about 5 blocks east and west from the location that was a main hangout for most of the people in our neighborhood, Lincoln Park. So ended up growing up in Danville to the completion of high school. After that, moved over here to Indianapolis to continue education in architectural engineering technology, and where we ended up staying here a long time. Upon graduation, I didn't think the job opportunities would be so prevalent in my field in Indianapolis, but I switched over to civil engineering and stayed in that field for 25 years working, enjoying what I did on various levels of design and implementation. We were always on the office side in engineering of design. So did that for several years. And it wasn't too long after completing my education at ITT Tech where I recognized and acknowledged God's call of me into the gospel preaching ministry. And so that's where the ministry path began. And right about now, that's nearing 40 years in the preaching ministry. Currently serving the church that I've been a part of for a long time, Greater Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. I served under my predecessor. My predecessor served under his predecessor. So in our nearly 100 years existence, the church has experienced 3 pastors in a good 80 years of that existence. There was only about 7 years from the inception of our church being organized, and they just rotated and went through some pastors. But my predecessor's predecessor, Dr. F.K. Dillard, served the church 28 years. My predecessor served 29 years, and I'm rolling into 21 and a half years at this point. So that brings us forward to where we are. Nothing by personal merit, but all by God's grace, His mercy, and I am grateful to be where I am right now and sharing this moment with my friend, longtime friend.
Wow, James, I'm learning like everybody else. I didn't know you had that many years into the ministry. That's a beautiful thing. Wow, I'm learning. Like I said, I'm learning like everyone else.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about, let's see, you said over 40 years of ministry. That's amazing.
Yeah, I am pleased and proud of all the promotions, the annual promotions God gives me. So being 59 last year, looking at 60 this year, I find nothing to be ashamed about. I celebrate God allowed me to spend time on His earth this long, to tolerate my mishaps occasionally, as much as I try to get it right, and still, keep His hand on me to be where I am and allowing me to even serve His people. And so shortly after ITT, um, everybody has a story. So mine was first finish the first tier of education. Um, this is real talk. So
That's
college
right.
for everybody is not realistic. Okay. It's a wonderful idea and notion, but it's not realistic for everybody. It's not reality for everybody. If you have the money and lack the discipline to navigate your way through a curriculum, it's going to be a bust for you. It's a good thing that we have alternative levels of education. I did everything I needed to do in high school in preparation to go to college. Had I pursued that and I wanted to go specifically to a college, I could have done that. What I wanted to do was grasp the education of my interest and focus, which was geared toward architecture. Engineering was just a strong component of that. My choice to go that direction is I didn't want to know just how to make things look good. I wanted to make sure that I had confidence in beyond aesthetic appearance that they would have functionality to them. And so that was the engineering component. You'll remember our one of our main hangout places on the east side of town was Laurel Leaf Fellowship House,
Yeah.
and it was there where I got introduced to the idea of going in engineering. They had a job fair that, as those things go, sometimes on my own I would not have gone, but my mother compelled me to go, and I'm looking around at all these tables that are set up there, trying to figure out, okay, well, yeah, I'm here, so who do I go talk to? And finally, this guy, he's sitting at the table, and he might have had engineering up there. I forget what his actually career focus was. So I walk over to him, and we start dialoguing. He asked me what I want to do, and I told him. And he said, well, the architecture, and that's good. But he said, if you really want to know where it is, it's engineering. And he said, I don't know any engineers who are out of work. Now, granted, that was 1979, 1980, maybe. But having a conversation with somebody on the other side of the table, telling me I don't know any engineers who are out of work, yeah, that sounds like something I could go for. That would be concerning.
Right.
I bid hard on that, and I'm going to tell you what. In 25 years of doing engineering, I was never unemployed longer than I wanted to be or needed to be. So, whatever reason I may have become disconnected from a employer, termination, yes, that did happen to me a couple of times. Um, but you need to know your worth. You need to know your marketability. And I knew those things. So when I went
Nice.
to the next employer, even if I was terminated, I didn't go with the proverbial tail between my legs mentality. No, I'm still a viable person in this field of work, and I'm bringing something to you when I'm coming to ask for your employment, seek employment from you. So there's no occasion where I experienced termination where I didn't come out better or ahead than I was previously with an employer. And 25 years that God taking me through that bivocationally on the early side of going into ministry, working through some things, but 25 years of that. So um, and the 40-year aspect was after completing ITT, education in ITT, my first employment, 81, so that would have been 82, um, 83, 84. First career employment position, engineering firm was January of 84, when I started at the beginning of the year. And about 30 days into that employment, being quite happy with that and satisfied, I had no problem with learning more and becoming more valuable aside from my degree. So that's why I went the civil engineering direction. And in reflection, I just began realizing, how good God had been to me and realizing that now I needed to do something for Him. He gave me time to navigate through first level of education, become gainfully employed in a solid profession of engineering, and it's time to give back. And I'm pondering, what is it I can do? What do you want me to do? And so I wrestled with that for a little while, beyond January and all. And when I had a contemplative moment that it lasted long enough to really seriously seek God on what He wanted me to do to give back. And so this list is scrolling through my mind of things you could do in the church, virtually everything from choir member, which Jewel and I were in Bel Air Choir, children's choir together.
Yeah.
All that stuff I did, even deacon. That's a certain type of way to go into ministry in God's church and His business. And I scrolled down everything I knew I could do. Some things I'd already done, singing in the choir, being an usher, all these things, and none of those things were what God wanted me to do. And then the list went blank. It was literally like a scroll, like piece of paper just scrolling down the list of things in the church. What do I do? And I went through all those things, and then the paper went blank. And I said, well, I know it's not any of those. And it's almost like some comedy shows you see or whatnot. Then I thought I'm done. I said, well, it's not that. So I guess I ain't, nothing. And then preaching pops up, and I see that pop up, and I'm like, it can't be that. Whatever it is you want me to do, it can't be that. But surely it was. And I'm glad that no disrespect or disregard to other ministers that I've heard, God called me at such and such point in my life, and I ran and I ran. I'm glad I didn't run that long. Um,
Okay.
that would have been my loss. Okay, I know that. But it, kicked it around, make sure God really knew what He was doing. Want me to go into preaching.
Okay.
Had an occasion riding with Dad, Jewel, taking Lisa back to Eastern at that time, and that was about April of that year, that very same year, and they gave me a chance to talk with him, ask him about it, and he gave his response, and that was in April of that year. I was like, okay, well, um, and then we went to our district association, Wood River District, Wood River Baptist District Association, which was touted as the oldest district association in the world, actually. Um,
Uh,
but went to that meeting um, that I hadn't been to since being in school to help confirm the decision on what God wanted me to do, and did get that confirmation during that meeting in July, that 1 week meeting in July. And shortly off the backside of that, came back home to Second Baptist Church and came forward and let the church know what God had called me to do. My father was already aware of that, so he wasn't surprised by that because we'd had a previous conversation, and off we
so
went.
what did that feel like, James? Like when you were called to preach? Like for those that the men or women
Mm,
who may feel like there's a calling. What does that feel like exactly? It's not like he came down and touched you on your shoulder. You know, what can you explain what it felt like and the feeling you had when you said, "Okay, I'm going to be obedient"?
Mhm. Yeah. And that was the key. That was really the key, is making the choice to be obedient once realizing that there was no question that God had called me to do. So I'm glad you asked the question, because a few times in my life, maybe I've been asked, about the calling. What was the experience like? Now, we can be all mystical if we want to about it, but not too long ago, many years ago, one of my children's school teachers asked me that, as we were talking about our choices regarding our professions. Um, he went into teaching. That's kind of understandable. That's second thing to my heart, beyond preaching God's word, is teaching. I'm absolutely emphatic about that. But I'm glad he asked, because this is a school teacher who I did not have any reason to believe he had any deep faith conviction, if he had any at all. So giving this mystical answer, well, I don't know. I just knew I was called, really wasn't acceptable. So it gave me the opportunity to produce a more practical response to that, and it simply came down to this. Look, um, I believe in this life, the purpose I'm serving, not too dissimilar from yours. The purpose that I am called to serve in this life is to help people become the best person they can be. And one of the ways I believe that I can best facilitate that is by introducing them to faith in God. And if they so choose to accept that, you're on your way to being more of the best person you can be. If you choose to reject it, well, it doesn't mean you won't be a good person. But as far as my role, my purpose in life, and the reason for acknowledging that call in the ministry, I'm called to help people be the best person that they can be. And I believe faith is the biggest part of that.
That's really nice, and I do understand that because some of us have this help. Uh, I call it energy. Everybody doesn't have that, and the tenacity
Yep.
or the artistic ability to put it into perspective, I'll say. And then to hear you say architecture, it all came back around to the fact that you have a creative way,
Yep.
excuse me, to get across to people. That's amazing. So that, see, I'm glad we're here talking about this because I never really understood. But can I just tell the listeners, I let me just say I feel artistic as well,
Mhm.
because I literally saw that in you. I don't know if it was peace. Sometimes people just look so peaceful,
Mhm.
but then yet you can see that energy or that whatever it is that draws you to people. I feel like I saw that way back in the day when we were
Mhm.
walking down the street. And what possessed me to say that, I don't know either. But I just, you kind of connect with certain people and
Mhm.
you can see what other people cannot see. But it's not for us to do anything, maybe just to plant the seed. I don't know, but
Mhm.
I'm glad that after all these years, here you are.
Mhm.
And so, moving to the next question, you mentioned a way to give back. So, helping the men, do you help with self esteem issues? How do you think you're going to move forward in that area?
Well, um, much has been done before. There was no limit to whom I was called to help. There was not necessarily a precursor that said, no, your focus is men's ministry, your focus is women's ministry, even as a man. There's room for that. Your focus is on dealing with young people and children. Well, no, my focus was in broad scope of humanity in its entirety, no matter who it was, who I come into contact with. Not that I'm all that. I just know what my desire is, to help people realize the all that they can be. And
Mhm.
so there's no limit in scope on that. This week we are doing something that I've been in. Well, I haven't been involved in it quite that long, but 52-year existence of a men's conference that I got involved with in my early 20s with my mentor, Dr. F. Benjamin Davis. People who are local in the Midwest. Well, he's even a nationally renowned. He was nationally renowned when he was living, in the work that he did and who he was. But education was his focus. So we'll be involved in a conference this week that's been going on in different name, but going on for the past 52 years. And I had to come to the celebratory reality of that when somebody asked me in a meeting last week that we had. They saw that it's marketed as the second annual of this occurrence, and this was a gentleman older than me, old enough to be my father, and he said, "No, and I thought this has been going on longer than that." And I said, "Well, really, it's 52 years. The first run of it spanned 40 years." Um, that my mentor, Dr. Davis, died. Before that actually closed up, it was an extended activity of the seminary that I was enrolled in at some point. So that was a 40-year run in the location where our church is, and then we needed to rebrand it. And so we should make light of the importance of branding certain things, because that's to establish who we are, as well as what we're doing, what we fully encompass as a brand. So, um, as much as Dr. Davis meant to me, there were many people he did not mean as much to, and sometimes depending on who you are in our African American history determines how much you can accomplish with a name. So his name will always be foundational in what we're doing. Um, but we needed to rebrand, and so we did that. My privilege was to honor him by titling the conference in his name, and that's what we did. And we ran that for 10 years. But again, realizing that, reflecting upon what our goals were in developing and transforming men, as it was in that conference, to be better than they were. We needed to draw our younger men and address what is still going on right now, sometimes to some people's ignorance, and that's unintentional, but generational curse, because we have not passed down the legacy of the best of ourselves historically to our younger generations. And
Right.
so when you deal with that generationally, you're talking about, I mean, at least every 20 years, you've got a generation, especially that's the way it's marked biblically. And the psalmist lets us know, we're all generally promised three score and 10. So that would be 70 years. A score is 20 years times 360 at 10, 70. So we all generally got 70 years to live. Okay. Well, I'm pushing the, I'm pushing the mark on that about now.
Me too.
Okay, so I
I
need to
know.
look at it. What am I leaving behind as a legacy,
Yeah.
while I'm yet living, and what I have not yet accomplished? What am I doing about trying to make that still happen? So, we did that to change it to what it is now, is religious education and ministry conferences that is relative to my academic pursuits, my current academic pursuits. Some of the things I believe in most is education. And so that's what we're doing now. But that's a 52-year run on that. And on the women's side, I'd been asked to do that for a number of years in the past, and just finally got to the place where, after we rebranded as the conference name that we are now, added the women's component to that. And all that launched last year, inceptionally last year, as that new branded name. And We're off to a solid start. Now we just got to keep on building.
And make it happen. That's
Yeah.
good. Well, that's great. Well, let's get a little uh, deeper and go into the philosophy of life, or you pick that area and let's just bring it on in. What is your philosophy about life, about the way things are going now with the men, and just life in general? What can you say to those who are, I don't know, not giving up, but discouraged?
Hang in there. It's a familiar term and phrase. I don't use it lightly, but that's exactly what we've got to do. There's no alternative to that. If you still want to succeed, if you still want to see those dreams that you may have had materialize, you've got to hang in there because quitting is not an option. It's much the same as we approach any number of things that we take on in our life. Their failure is always a possibility. Okay. But when we are zestfully going after those things that we desire to see happen in life, personal or otherwise, um, even though failure is a possibility, we should not ever embrace that. Now, when we're trying to get something done, now when we're going somewhere, we should never embrace failure as a probability. Okay.
Right.
We just
I
only need to
agree.
consider it's a possibility, but I don't approach anything I'm doing that failure is going to be the probability. So you just got to hang in there, have multiple plans. Okay. Things are going to happen, life's going to happen. So have more than one plan to achieve your goals. So when one plan doesn't quite work out as you thought it would, you still got another backup plan. Look, you probably need to have about 5 backup plans, whatever one goal
Yeah.
or plan you have to ensure personally that you can keep going. You have to know yourself. You have to know your self worth. You don't let anybody define that for you because I have had people stand toe to toe with me face to face and tell me what I'm not when I know
Mhm.
fully I'm the opposite of that, or tell me what I am, knowing that I'm not that person at all. And people will tell you that, but that's their opinion. Everybody's entitled to that. As long as you know who you are, I know who I am. I'm committed. I'm compelled to make these things happen, whatever it takes. But I won't get there by quitting. Is 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 looming as that is sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think the difference there is realizing whether you're quitting in terms of giving up or whether you need to recognize a certain season in your life has come to an end. Now, if a certain season in my life has come to an end, I'm good with that. That's entirely different than quitting and giving up.
Mhm.
But if I don't know that season's coming to an end, just gotta hang in there.
Yeah, see, that's good. That's a good word. Also, what about self-esteem? Like, we always talk about the men, the prince, the kings, but to attain that title, self-esteem is a big part of that. So, how did any, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is stroking ego,
Mhm,
part of being
mhm.
self-esteem. Who were there in your world in to help facilitate, to help solidify, and for you to feel that you, well, we already know your self-worth. You spoke that earlier, but what did that look like for you, boosting your self-esteem?
You know, another great question on the reality of things. You're talking about a guy who even today, thank God for the health that I'm in, but you're talking about a guy who's no taller than 5'5". I do not lie about my height. I never have lied about my height. It's a thing that guys easily like to do is lie about their height, give themselves 2 inches more than what they are. When you cut that stuff out, you get on the measuring tape, you are what you are. That's the first thing, accept what you are.
There you
Um,
go.
I was never the prototype guy. Okay. Back in the day, the ancient uh, prototype for a man of worth was, especially now, going back from when we were younger, especially things that you got to navigate your way through while you're young, trying to understand who you are and your worth. Um, I was never going to be the tall, dark, and handsome guy. Again, it was a long time before I grew, to what I even am now. And
Okay.
so it's never going to be the tall, dark, and handsome guy back in the day. Um, Jill remembers the timelines of this, otherwise, it's good talking to a friend. At some point in time, we know in our race and culture, fair skin was in. So the light skinned guy and the light skinned girls, they were the ones who got the attention. That was never going to be me. Jill knows that was never going to be her.
Oh,
Jill was the in the cut girl in the
I was the well, I was the overweight one. You forget, I was overweight and didn't get to play a lot. And when I got to go out and play, I was the awkward one.
Yes,
Yes.
she was always solid, but she was in the cut. And so, but listen, her and another young lady from the neighborhood, I celebrate, their life as it's turned out for them. But see, Jewel was one of the first young ladies in the neighborhood to get married, and still married to this day. All right, another
Yeah.
young lady who was younger than I was, same way. She was a wonderful person in spirit. I will be courteous not to call her name, even though she probably wouldn't mind. But she okay. Let me
It's
for for
okay.
for for, for your sake. I will just I will use the name Crosby. Okay. All right. So
Okay.
that's the only clue I'm gonna give you for the sake of discretion. Um,
Okay.
but good friend of mine, one of the sweetest persons, girls in the neighborhood, solid, in the cut girl. She wasn't the one that got the attention from the guys, but I'll be doggone if one of the best guys I know to this day from the other side of town, got connected with her. And another one, she was one of the first people to get married, and again, they're still married to this day. So I say all that to say is overindulgence, which is done in extremes today, on a daily basis. Overindulgence in the physical, overemphasis on the external, is futile in determining who we really are. You say I wasn't the tall, dark, and handsome. I had five running buddies that people know who they were. My best friend, Michael Dow, died last year. You didn't hardly see him without me, vice versa. He had a big family, other friends in our circle, big families. They were well known, much more well known than I was. For us, it was our family nucleus was my mother, father, and my two sisters. Okay, and then beyond that, the community was our family. The church was our family. So I was never the one that got all that attention. Um, but thank God it didn't deter me
Yeah.
knowing who I was. Uh,
Yes.
so
Yes.
we gotta be careful of the superficial, the super fluff, all that kind of stuff. You got to be people blowing smoke at you with ulterior motives as well. Oh, you're this and you're that, and that's just so they can run game on you or something. Just it's an inside out experience. It's your character. At the end of the day, no matter what we look like, your character is going to make the difference. People are going to remember how you treated them more than how you look to them. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. That look, that's the nugget right there. So, as my mom would say, take heed, people. But
Uh,
yeah, that's a nugget right there. Wow, James, why is time always goes fast when you get right to the meat of the message?
well,
What is it that you can say in closing, unless you want to keep going? We've been known to go longer, but typically, uh, 35, 40 minutes, because people today, their attention span is shorter. But
very
like I say, give us something to take it on in, and uh, hopefully we'll get to do this again, and different topics. Like, let us know, people, what kind of questions you may have. And for the men, we now have someone that can a go-to. And do you want to put your handles in, go ahead, or I can put it in the description box? How do you want to? Do you have time for people to um, get in touch with you for support, encouragement? Uh,
I do. um, as I am still rebranding myself and getting ready for new seasons in the future. Um, in this loose world, I will say, with you and your platform, I'm comfortable. Certainly providing some increased access to me. As a pastor, our church isn't mega church. Um, we're a small, what I like to tell our folks, we're a small kingdom church doing big kingdom things. But there are some limitations I place on my availability because I don't want a lot of external contact to interfere. Now, I'm responsible for managing that, but I don't allow that to interfere
yeah,
with the management I have to do as a pastor, even of the members that I are responsible caring for. But I think the best way to get a hold of me, as opposed to my Facebook page, which is just my name, look me up. It's James A. Green. You'll find me on Facebook. That can be a place for you to start. If you want to, there's something really on your mind, you feel like you want to, it requires a little more urgent attention, and you feel like maybe I can support you in that. You can go to my email is James A. Green 14 at outlook.com. That's my name, James A. Green. Green is spelled like the color, the number 14 at outlook.com. Those are going to be the best ways to get an immediate response out of me. And I prefer
yeah,
that because it's documented that way. So, again, I'm called to help, and that scope is not limited. The fact is, God is really letting me know how much larger that sphere is going to be and should be. And a lot of people need help. And the fact that you realize that doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you strong, knowing that you need some help. So I'm willing to offer whatever support I can give on those levels, however that may be. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me that way.
well, that's good. And plus, yes, everybody's busy. So, you know, to even visit the church and meet other people in the church is also a way to decompress. Just to
Mhm, mhm.
be in a church family, growing up, that's what we knew. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody was family, and I think that's what people are missing nowadays, because they may have even church hurt, and they
yeah.
don't know how to let that go, or find a place that where they feel like it's home. We've always been in an environment where no matter where we went, we felt like we were at home.
That's right.
So yeah, that's important. But for the men to be able to look at it that way, not look at it any other way but that way. As far as family is concerned, we all need to connect. We all need to get closer together. But I'm glad you came on the platform so that they can see, we go way back. And
Go ahead.
even now, it's like family.
Hmm.
So these are the relationships I feel that people want to start cultivating, because it's nothing like family. They may not be, you know, blood. Sometimes it's people in your church, people in your environment, people that treat you the way you want to be treated, which is what you said. And it all
Mhm.
goes back to treat people the way you want to be treated.
What it comes down
Well,
to.
yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off? And I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate this time. I've learned a
Yeah.
little bit and uh, like to learn more and continue success on your endeavors because we can keep growing, keep
Yeah.
growing.
Yeah. Well, appreciate the opportunity for reconnection. As you and I know, it took a few hits and misses to get it right, but appreciate the reconnection. Again, several, maybe a month ago, saw what you're doing on your platforms as you were getting out there, and it is necessary. So I commend you on what you're doing in that arena, and I encourage
Thank
you to
you.
keep on doing that. And I guess the main thing to leave everybody with is never apologize for who you are. Okay, know who
Amen.
that person is, but don't apologize for who you are. Um, as a African American male, and I've written this in one of my papers as well, school papers, but it's a reality. There is no race that I know of that exercises such a disregard for male support. I'm talking the actual literal male support in life, other than African American households. And too many good men. I don't experience a lot of that because, frankly, I kick it back. I was having lunch at a restaurant, Cracker Barrel, with a friend of mine one time, and she and I were arguing back and forth about some stuff, and our waiter came to the table, somebody we're familiar with, and she chimed in on it. She said, "Well, you know, you got two women standing right here in front of you," and I said to her, "Well, you better go back in the kitchen and get some help." Okay. Um, so I'm not apologizing for who I am. So what I share with the men, that's what I was doing as we were preparing to come on. There's something I know that I share with men, and with everybody, male or female. So don't apologize who you are. Know who that person is. Accept that God made you that way, and don't apologize. And when it comes to men, my statement with them is an affirmation of purpose that we use in the conference. Affirmation of purpose is that we are unquestionably, unequivocally, and unapologetically men. And when it comes to faith, that means that we are men of God. So, yeah, I don't apologize who I am. We came up, grew up listening to a song way back in the day, 70s, what you see is what you get. Hey, well,
Okay.
that's what it
Yeah.
is. I am who I am. Ideally, you'll like me. Maybe we have opportunity to like each other. It starts with respect, even if we don't like each other. Mutual respect can get us to a place where an opportunity where we may be able to like each other. But I'm not going to apologize for who I am. God made me that way with a purpose, and I'm going to live in that on purpose.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know that's right. Well, I say the same thing too. What you see is what you get. I'm simply Jewel. I'm simply who I am. No more, no less. With that being said, thank you so much, James, for coming
Thank
on.
you.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You have been listening to Simply Jewel Atypical Podcast. Um, I'm just trying to see if there's anything else that we need to add into the equation. But again, maybe we'll get to have you back on again, James.
Be
So
glad to
thank
do
you
it.
so much.
Be glad to do it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Peace and blessings.